this is Kelly Sadler, and this is this week's Politically Unstable. I am joined by Olivia Turner, the president of the Virginia Society for Human Life, and we're going to approach kind of an uncomfortable topic for many elected Republican officials, and that is of abortion. Now, Olivia, Republicans have been on the losing side of this issue since Roe has been overturned. We had a victory with Roe being overturned, but in subsequent elections, officials, people running for office either haven't addressed it at all, the issue of abortion. They've been timid on it, and they don't seem to have the right messaging to actually win over, the suburban women that come out in droves and vote for Democrats on this issue. So I'd like to get your perspective on what do you think went wrong, in both the midterm elections and the elections that we just had this year in Virginia, where the Republicans lost, the House and the Senate, and what Republicans can do to better this, because this issue of abortion is not going away. It's going to be an issue also in 2024.
Yeah, that's exactly the reality we have to face. The abortion issue is not going away. There is a historic, it's even before Dobbs, there is a historic tendency among Republicans in particular, and virtually all candidates, unless they are hardcore pro-abortion candidates, to run from the issue, to not know how to address it, shall I put it that way. And it's really a sense of this is a big topic. It's scary. It's very personal. And the primary reason why it becomes so complicated for so many is that in all reality, abortion is personal. It's touched even the lives of candidates. It's in all our families. And as a result, people are very afraid of it. There is also a tendency to make this issue something that is not what it is. It is about ending the life of an innocent unborn child and wounding that child's mother. And yet that's not the way the dynamic of the conversation has gone for some time. The dynamic has entirely been, and particularly now after Dobbs, it's all about supposedly a woman's health care. Well, abortion has nothing to do with health care, and it has everything to do with the way the debate is going right now. It really is about protecting the abortion industry, the businesses that abortion organizers have created.
So, in terms of addressing the issue head on, which I agree with you 100%, Glenn Youngkin really shied away from the issue during the midterm elections, and only in the last week came out with messaging, fighting against the narrative of the left, which basically, as you said, they frame it as a woman's healthcare issue, and that their Republicans want to ban abortion, that they want to take a right that you once had away from you. So in terms of addressing the Democratic narrative and also coming out in the forefront and addressing this issue head on, what type of message do you think that will win over those women who might not have had an abortion, or they know somebody who has and feel compassion for that woman, don't believe that she should be criminalized or ostracized from society because of her choice, but she should still be able to have that choice?
Well, let's go back to what I said earlier about how personal
Okay.
the abortion
Mm.
issue is. It's personal, and that means that when any candidate is talking to the public, and particularly our Republican candidates, when they're talking to the public about abortion, the anxiety comes in because they don't think about this, but they're really talking to the fear and pain that exists in virtually every family, the memories of an abortion that grandma had, or that my sister-in-law had, or that someone I love had. And they need to stop thinking about it in terms of we're going to make some kind of rational argument here. You can't make a rational argument alone in the face of that kind of triggered pain. And since Dobbs, the pro-abortion left has been particularly good at triggering that anxiety, that pain, that memory of that dreadful day when I made a decision to have an abortion. Now, I had an abortion myself, so I'm very comprehending of what's driving this. So when you look at how the Republicans and the governor, et cetera, tried to frame this, they thought they could just simply boil it down to, well, nobody likes late-term abortions, so we'll create a scenario where we talk about preventing abortions after 15 weeks. Well, that was, number one, a big mistake, because they played into the idea that an arbitrary line in the sand of a particular week, 15 weeks, was acceptable to most people. Well, many people said, well, why not 5 weeks, or why not 28 weeks? And so, in other words, weeks or the time of length of the pregnancy was just an arbitrary concept to most people. And that sounded worse than the idea of oh my gosh, we're going to ban all abortions, which the Democrats said relentlessly Republicans were going to do. So instead of addressing what has been a common social wound that has touched every family and wanting to find a path to both protecting women and their unborn children, the Democrats were able to play on this really poorly thought out messaging of, well, we think that abortion should be illegal after 15 weeks, but legal before. And that did get several candidates in trouble who misspoke. I pray. I hope they would have passed pro-life laws if they had the opportunity, but they openly said, well, look, I think abortion should be kept legal up to 15 weeks, and then afterwards, well, we all agree it should be prevented. Well, most people don't think that way.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Can you share about you just brought up that you had an abortion. Can you share kind of what your experience was and how, life has changed you right now so that you're one of the foremost advocates of pro-life. Like what changed, what brought you to the stance that you have right now? And what was your experience like when you chose to have an abortion?
Well, very simply, I was like millions and millions of other young American women. I was a college student. I was unwed. I was unemployed. My baby's father was in the same situation, and we went to. It was fully legal. It had been legal for over 15 years by the time I had my abortion, and so we went to find somebody we could afford. We ended up going to 4 different abortion providers. The abortionists that we spoke to, each one essentially told me one way or the other, using these words, which I will never forget: I was stupid, childish, irrational, selfish, and unable to think clearly because I was pregnant. Some variation of those words were used repeatedly at the encounters. Now, we had to find somebody we could afford. We had to find somebody that we could have the abortion done quickly and without our parents' knowledge. Both of us were in college, but living at home that semester in our respective family homes. So I now look back at that and go, okay, when they tell me that abortion is intended to uplift women and give us a sense of integrity and dignity, making decisions for our lives and our bodies, I know that that's garbage. That it's really about making women feel poorly about their ability to cope with complicated moments in their life, their pregnancy being a complicated moment, and rather saying, well, if you just got rid of this problem, our
Mhm.
babies, we'd be able to proceed and go ahead with our lives. Well, it has changed my life. I've worked in the pro-life movement since the early 1980s, when I was the founding member with a group of 5 other women, of the first post-abortion peer-to-peer program in the country called Women Exploited by Abortion. I was known as Olivia Gans then. Olivia Gans Turner is my name now. And the truth is that the reality is that we know what abortion doesn't do. Which it doesn't do is give women options that provide for their integrity, their opportunity. So my commitment to the pro-life movement is as much for the mothers as well as our children. It's beyond that. And it makes me angry that after all this time, it's so hard for candidates to understand that you can speak to us. You can speak to
Mhm.
those of us who've had abortion experiences and address the fear and actually offer solutions
Mhm.
that assist us. In Virginia, there are over 42 pregnancy resource centers that offer free services and care. Some offer medical care, some offer different kinds of material support, clothing, food, etc., paying the rent, and some offer the ability for women to stay with a program for up to 3 years after their children are born, giving them job training, educational opportunities, getting them on their feet.
Mhm.
So, and of course, there's always the option of adoption. So there are programs in Virginia that help to assist families to make the right decision there. So my goal with what we do when I'm talking to legislators, when I'm working with candidates, it's to help them understand that we have something to offer. It's
Yeah.
not just, we're not trying to take something away. We're not trying to ban something. We want to do better. We want our society to be more receptive and uplifting and welcoming. Abortion bans, the idea of a ban, that was not in the playbook. That actually was something that I think many candidates tried to avoid. They used the language of protective laws and rational laws and reasonable laws that 70% of people support. 70% of people do support preventing abortion in the later stages of pregnancy. That is a well-established fact. So I think when I take my life experience and I work with legislators who are listening, who are willing to listen, and you look at legislators like Senator-elect Tara Durant, She didn't run away from being pro-life. She's
Mm.
solidly, openly, clearly pro-life. And she openly on the campaign trail talked about her desire to pass reasonable protective legislation, including legislation that would create a website to help women find out about the resources we have in Virginia. Delegate Emily Brewer, or actually now Senator-elect Emily Brewer, did the same thing. She talked about being a child of adoption. She was adopted. She's pro-life. She doesn't hide that. So
Yeah.
hiding from being pro-life is not a good idea for candidates. They need to be bold.
Well, and also it can't be a negative, what you just said. It can't be, you can't be defending a negative, like, oh, I don't want to ban it, but I want it after, 15 weeks, we shouldn't have abortion. It gets very um clinical when you start speaking about it, and
Yeah.
it doesn't connect with the woman. And we do, as Republicans, want to offer one of the things, and we had a previous conversation about this, but one of the things that you said that struck me is that a woman who's in a precarious position in her life, that got pregnant, she doesn't have the tools she feels that she needs to bring that child into the world. Her economic situation is not great. She can go into the Planned Parenthood, get that abortion, get no support for her decisions or her mental health after she's had that abortion. But
Mhm.
then she goes right back into the same situation before she had the abortion.
Right.
She's still not
Exactly.
going to be economically well off. She's still going to be in the same position that she was before. But we, as Republicans, have solutions to help pick her up off her feet, to also to bring the baby in the world, but also to help her get out of whatever situation she might currently be in.
Right, and I think one of the things that we don't understand is the language and the discussion about concept of 15 weeks was so hurtful to our efforts
Mhm.
because the bill was not a 15-week ban. The bill the governor wanted to pass was a bill based on the capacity of unborn children to feel pain. Well, that resonates very deeply with people when
Mhm.
you phrase it that way. When you talk about why you wanted to prevent abortions after 15 weeks because children feel pain during the abortion process, it resonates because people, all of us experience pain.
Mhm.
65% of women in particular support the idea of a bill that prevents abortion when babies can feel pain in the womb. So you have two things going on. A, we're not addressing the reality that every family has been touched by an abortion. Everybody has a brother-in-law who paid for one, a sister who had one, a cousin who helped somebody else get one or works at an abortion facility. It's touching all of our families. So we have to talk to that. We have to communicate our understanding and compassion that we understand abortion in many people's experience is a necessary evil. They believe abortion is necessary because my daughter-in-law was told her baby would be was in dire straits, and so an abortion was absolutely necessary. So families, or what if my sister is raped? I'm worried about my sister should she be raped.
Mhm.
So you have these scenarios of fear that people run with, and the pro-abortion side traded on that very well during the election cycle because they knew what drives this issue is people's fear, their anxiety, the stresses that are connected to pregnancies at difficult times. Whereas pro-lifers and pro-life candidates in particular are not good at talking about, hey, I get it. I understand there are scenarios that frighten us, that create really dangerous scenarios in some cases for someone. A woman is living, she's trafficked or she's abused. These are real life circumstances that make some
Mhm.
people think abortion has to happen. So what we need to be doing is creating a path to helping them understand, we hear you, we see you, we understand. This is our response. Our response is to protect you and to protect your unborn child. That's why, as a legislator, I will work to pass laws that will do both, that will respond to your need. We need to be bold as Republicans. We need to wake up and realize that, VSHL, by the way, is not a Republican or Democrat
Yeah.
organization. It just happens there aren't any pro-life Democrats running for office in Virginia right now. So we tend to be supporting and endorsing only Republicans, but Republicans have to take some bold moves. We're going to have to open our pockets, and we're going to have to expand different kinds of maternal health care programs in Virginia. We're going to have to explore ways that we can. One of the interesting things I saw recently was that VSU, Virginia State University, has opened a dorm just for mothers, young single mothers who want to continue full-time as students at VSU can live with their children, whether it's an infant or a 5-year-old, in that dormitory. It's not a very big dorm. They can't house a lot of students yet, But it's exactly what every state university in Virginia should be doing. Do we need to explore legislation that creates a path so that our campuses can have a space where young mothers can live safely with their children and get an education? That's pro woman and pro child. So it means thinking differently, and it means for
Mhm.
Republicans thinking differently, and it means realizing that you can talk about this issue if you don't use words that scare people like ban, and you
Mhm.
don't use things like, well, I believe, that women should, thanks be to God, nobody says this in Virginia, but there are some people who advocate punishing the women or criminalizing
Yeah.
women, and we will never support that. Virginia Society of Human Life will never support that. Virginia Society of Human Life and 75 other pro-life organizations around the country signed a letter last spring, actually openly, bluntly stating we never have, nor will we ever in the future endorse legislation or support legislation that would criminalize women, because we know, as in my experience, the abortion industry, the businesses in Virginia and everywhere in the country that push abortion are in the business of belittling and bringing women down, not bringing women up, and certainly not protecting our children. So we we never will pursue that. That's the goal. The goal is to protect mothers and children.
Well, I mean, the way that you discuss it, I think, is very rational. It's very compassionate. It makes a lot of sense. But there are extremes on both the right and the left. The left, you can't pin a legislator down or anyone running for public office right now on what exceptions or limitations they support on abortion. They support it up until the ninth month. But on the right hand side of things, you also have those that are ardently pro-life, believe that life begins at conception, and that there should be an abortion should be off the table altogether. How and the left is very good at painting the right as being radical and saying and using the ban word, and we have to accept on the right as Republicans that we haven't convinced enough of the population yet of the pro-life stance where it should not be allowed or shouldn't be considered at all. How do we make practical gains in persuading others um, about the importance of life, knowing that we're not quite there yet? Um, how can the right be persuasive on this? Because and take I suppose what I'm trying to say here is, shouldn't the right be willing to take small wins that ultimately accomplish our goal and not just want a total victory all at one time?
Well, here you have the complication between the base, good,
Hmm.
solid folks who live in Virginia and anywhere else in the country who are strongly pro-life, and people who are in politics, people who are in office, who understand you got to do what you got to do when you can do it. And so, yes, there are people in the base who are frustrated because they thought things like the governor's Paying Capable Unborn Child Protection Act bill wasn't good enough because it didn't protect babies younger. It is true that I think the number is now 93% of abortions are done before the 12th week of pregnancy, and that's mostly because of the rise in the use of chemical abortions, which are extremely dangerous to women's health and well-being, as well as deadly for our children. So, but with the rise in chemical abortion, it does make many people in the base go, yes, but all those babies who are every bit as individual and unique as the rest of us are being killed. Well, yes, but if you don't have the votes, you can't accomplish certain things. Well, we certainly don't have the votes in Virginia right now, and so it's hard. Sometimes me, in my position as president of VSHL, I'm often trying to educate people about what is the process, and I'm really grateful that there are some members of the incoming General Assembly who are willing to try anyway. We know we're up against the same kind of, even a worse juggernaut this year, because you have a very limited, very tiny, but you have a majority of pro-abortion members, Democrat members, in both the Senate and the House this year. But you have people like Nick Freitas, who will be running the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. That's a bill that was directly designed in response to the comments of people like Ralph Northam, who said it was okay to
Hmm.
let a baby who survives an abortion just simply die, or actually take action to kill the child. So He didn't say that's what's happening. These children are actually actively killed if they survive an abortion in the later stages of pregnancy. So this bill would allow survivors to get appropriate medical care, not extreme care, but whatever the appropriate medical care for a premature child in that circumstance would be. And hopefully that would allow some of them to survive. 10% of abortions are done in the later last 3 months of pregnancy, even in Virginia. So that's a risk that we face, and it's a
Mhm.
good bill. Um, Other bills might come forward that will do small step things. I know Senator-elect Durant, will introduce her bill to offer the idea that the Department of Health and Social Services should have a website link to the 42 pregnancy resource centers that exist
Mhm.
in Virginia so that women have a fighting chance of finding that information. So those are they're not directly going to stop any abortions, but they're important pieces of legislation because they help the people that need to be helped. They either save a life in the case of the Survivors Act, or and maybe save a life in the if a woman were to go to that website and see the help that's available. So there's ways that we can achieve our goals, even in the face of obstacles. I don't know how far any of that will get because I know that pro abortion people in the General Assembly won't let you do anything that actually draws attention to a different way of thinking, a different
Yeah.
way of doing this. So it is going to be an obstacle course. The base has to realize that you can stand in the kitchen. I've been told this is my analogy, and I'll say it again. You've heard me say it. You cannot stand in the kitchen and yell, I want to make an apple pie if you haven't got any apples in the house. But if you have a bowl of peaches, you should make a peach pie. You should go to the market. You should sell the pie and buy all the apples you need to make all the apples you want. Currently, we haven't got any apples in Virginia in the General Assembly. We have to do what is smart and what is possible. It's not because we're abandoning principles or saying that the babies that are uh, very, very little in their mother's wombs, the newly conceived children, they're all valuable. Every
Mhm.
human life is valuable. I mean, VSHL not just supports the abortion question, but we're also involved in protecting other vulnerable populations, the elderly, those who live with disabilities or chronic illness, all of whom are being threatened by attacks against innocent or vulnerable human life. So we have to look and see what can we do. Maybe we're going to have a lot of discussions on protecting vulnerable lives at other stages this year.
Yeah.
That could be where we go, and that would be good. So
Yeah.
my bottom line is, Kelly, we have things we can do, we have things we want to do, and we have to decide what will we do this year.
And it's being practical and pragmatic in the approach, knowing that you're not, it's just like you said, if you don't have any apples in the house, then make good with what you have,
Yeah.
and still, look out for the compassion of the mother, the child. As you said, your group also does work with the elderly and those disadvantaged, and I believe that's a good message moving forward. But we're into the presidential contest right now already.
Mhm.
It's 2024 is approaching. There's been many states that have put amendments on, you know, that
Mhm.
voters will have to go to vote up or down, and a lot of them pertain to the issue of abortion because the left believes that issue drives its base to go out and vote. And so as what recommendations could you give, whoever wins the GOP nomination, what should their message be on this topic, knowing that it will inevitably come up?
Well, let's deal with this reality right now. Virginia will be among those states entering the amendment debate.
Mm-hmm.
The both the House and the Senate have versions of a constitutional amendment to change the Virginia Constitution to allow unrestricted access to abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, and I do mean unrestricted. So no parental consent law would be allowed to stand. No provision against taxpayer funding of all abortions under our state-funded programs. No partial birth abortion ban. Nothing. No reasonable legislation that even requires who would be allowed to do abortions. So
Right.
anybody could be doing abortions, not just medical practitioners or personnel. So these are things that will happen if Virginia's amendment, which is a complicated process, it has to pass this session, then has to pass again after the elections in 2025. Thank goodness we have a cumbersome process, but they will probably be able to pass, and I'm certain that probably they will pass that amendment through both chambers in Virginia this year and begin this cycle. So for the next 2 years, the people of Virginia are going to be hearing about how wonderful the Democrats were because they got this amendment passed in the first step of this long process here in Virginia. It's a dreadful thing. We know from Vermont, we know from California, we know from multiple states, New York, etc., other states that have already passed these amendments, that they absolutely, completely put a chill on any kind of pro-life legislation being able to be passed in those states, and they overturn every existing pro-life law that may still be on the books in that place where they're passed. So it's good that we have the cumbersome process, but we are not in any way, shape, or form out of harm's way. We must get control of the General Assembly in 2025 so that this thing does not end up on our ballot in the election November of 2026. As far as the presidential candidates, VSHL can endorse candidates, and we haven't made a decision about who we would endorse. Obviously, it's far too early with the interesting gamesmanship going on at the Republican level. But that what is good to note is that all the Republicans running are pro-life. They are all willing to try to do something to advance the effort. Now, again, they will have to thread the needle. They'll have to look at where do they stand. I mean, if and this is true for the House of Representatives and the Senate, U.S. Senate, we need to get solid, strong pro-life majorities in both chambers to do virtually anything. I mean, there's a Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act that's been lingering in Congress for several years now. We can't even get it introduced. You can't even get the beginning steps. Right, it's still sitting in the Senate in a box somewhere getting dusty. So we can't even move forward on, and we can't move forward on. There's also a Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act at the federal level. We've had women and men who are actual survivors of abortion attempts come to Congress to testify, to talk, to lobby legislators, standing before them going, I survived a late term abortion. And yet there is a block to anything even as sensible as that. So we must get control. Whether or not we have to, again, we won't be able to make the kind of big changes that many pro-lifers are longing for with the overturn of Dobbs, because of the hurt, because of the wounding, because of the damage. And we have to be addressing that all the time, acknowledging that this is a society. We must also be bringing the reality that abortion takes another person's life. I hurt today. My heart grieves today because my child died when I paid someone in the 1980s to kill my child. I gave cash money on the desk to end my child's life. I've had to come to terms with that. I've had to reconcile my life to that knowledge. And millions of us, millions of women and men who participated in abortions have not done that yet in America. So we have a long way to go to heal the country. Luckily, the good news is those states that were in a position to pass laws, like our neighboring state, West Virginia, has helped to bring down the numbers of abortion in many places, so much so that a certain pro-abortion polling group did acknowledge that there were approximately 32,000 live births that took place in the last year because of states where they had strong pro-life laws. So lives do exist today. Human beings that we will all get to know down the road were able to be born because of the states that could pass laws. But we have a lot to do in Virginia to get anywhere close to that. A lot to do in Virginia.
Well, Olivia, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on this issue. I think your voice needs to be heard and elevated in terms of how we should approach this very troubling topic and the pragmatic steps that we need to kind of accomplish a pro-life agenda. So again, thank you so much for joining me this week.
I'm really happy to do it, Kelly. I'm really thrilled. I hope people will go to vshl.org and check out our programs, things that we do. We have a program right now going on for young people who can participate in an essay contest at the end of the year. So we do something for everybody. So hope folks will check us out because we need your involvement very much so.
Well, that's this week's edition of Politically Unstable. Thanks so much for joining us.